Hello, we're live. Welcome to my first live video on Instagram. I'm calling this series Showup Shop because the idea behind it is that I just show up. I don't have any goal other than to just put pen to paper for about 30 minutes and see where it goes. So, Showup Shop, number 1. Let's get to it. There's no real place that you need to start. If I don't know where, I just make a line. Make a squiggle, make a dot. The patterns just form organically after that. And there's certain things that I like to do. They're not super dogmatic rule sets. More like, as they say in Pirates of the Caribbean, guidelines, really. No pun intended. And I can get into some of that as we go along. But the real purpose of this video, which hopefully will be the first of a series, is to show myself, first and foremost, and anybody else who's interested, that art making and creativity, really, a lot of it just has to do with just doing it. And some art styles and processes are going to require more planning, more technical proficiency, perhaps some goals that you want to accomplish, and that's all fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It all has its place. But I don't know about you, but as for me, sometimes all of that can get in the way of what I really want to do, which is to just produce and to create and to express. So I thought I'd share a really cool paraphrasing of a quote that I heard in a movie. I don't know if it's being drawn from other sources. Anybody can comment and tell me if they've heard similar sentiments before. But the quote goes something like, "All art has craft, and all craft has art, but the goal of craft is perfection, while the goal of art is expression." Take from it what you will. I happen to like the quote. Because you can do anything and call it art with the right attitude, I think. Disagree? Go ahead and leave a comment. Tell me why. But it can be hard sometimes when you just feel like you have all this energy pent up with nowhere to go. And I find for myself that a side effect of that is that the energy becomes like a whirlpool within. and it can really do a number. So it can be hard to get started with art sometimes. And again, I just want to come back to the point. That's why I'm doing this. Because I like drawing. I like doodling. I like sketching. And I've been enjoying steadily building up my portfolio on Instagram. But sometimes the hardest part is just doing it. And it doesn't always happen spontaneously. Because there's a lot of gunk that we carry with us in our day-to-day lives that can clog the pipes and keep the energy from flowing. So again, that's what this is. Showup Shop. I came up with the name a while back. I wasn't sure if I liked it. Thought maybe I could coin something a little catchier, maybe a little more meaningful, but actually, I've sat with it, and I just decided, isn't the whole point just to show up? Isn't that the whole point that I've been making this whole time? Sorry for the vibrations here. I have a very shaky setup. So I think as I go on, I'd like to invest in some actual proper equipment to better record things. Also, I have my phone plugged in. Not sure how long the battery's going to last. And that's okay. Whatever comes of this session will be the art. And I'm still thinking about whether or not I want to do sort of continuations from one session to another. So for example, let's say I work on this one for half an hour today, and then it doesn't feel finished to me. Maybe I'll keep working on it. Alternatively, I might just post it as the result of a discrete period of time. And that's the other thing that I wanted to do with this project, is to not place any emphasis on the product, but merely on the time. I'll have to do some, I'll have to go look up the term, and if anybody remembers, you can remind me. But I believe in Zen, particularly like in Zen retreats or temples, they have a term for work time. And it's not about the product of the work. It's just about dedicating and putting aside that time for work. Whether it's scrubbing tiles, sweeping floors, etc. And I really like that, because I've always found it really hard to self-pace. Like in school, if I had an assignment coming up, I would have a month to do it, which in my mind meant I had 29 days to procrastinate, and then I would do everything the night before. And sometimes it worked out for me, but not without a lot of undue stress. It's the kind of thing where I would always tell students, children, do not take after me in that case. It's very much a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. Because I really don't recommend pushing everything to the last minute. The funny thing is, though, in life, sometimes we find ourselves in cycles and in patterns that we feel helpless to overcome. People talk a lot about personal responsibility, personal choice. I do think there are places for those conversations, but sometimes we also need to take a step back, give ourselves some grace, realize we're part of a big system. I'm not even just talking politically. We can examine different spheres of systems, nested spheres, right? Your neighborhood, your town, your state, your country, the globe. And then we keep zooming out and we see the planetary processions, these grand cycles of time and space. And from that point of view, not to make less of our experience, but really, from that perspective, who would blame a mote of dust? Except the other motes of dust. So welcome to any motes of dust that find themselves here with me today, live or otherwise. Very likely I will be placing either raw footage or edited footage of this onto YouTube. And possibly, if I feel so inclined and find a convenient way to do so, I'd like to take maybe a time lapse of my work today and then make little videos in time lapse format as well. I think TikTok could be a really good avenue for that, just given that they promote very short form videos. So I meant to have a clock or a timer with me, so I have no idea how much time has elapsed, and Instagram doesn't seem to be keeping track of it either. But that's okay. This is session 1 of Showup Shop. We are here. We showed up, which means we've already accomplished what we want to do today. And it's really a beautiful thing to not hold yourself to any goal. And to just play. I do feel that on some very deep level, life is play. But we can get very caught up in our personal narratives and stories. And with good reason. We are part of these grand patterns that perpetuate through time. And so again, I don't mean to delegitimize real struggles But, or maybe I should say and. I like to say and because it's inclusive rather than contrastive. So we struggle, and we can find time, even if it's a moment, to drop everything else. Let it wash away. It'll be there for you when you come back to it. I promise. Use judgment, of course. We don't do closed eye meditations on the highway. But take those moments. Breathe. It looks like I'm getting a little bit of fuzziness here and there. I think the focus changes. I hope that really doesn't ruin the experience too much. But like I say, as this project progresses, I'm going to get some better equipment to film more effectively. So we're going to let this kind of go organically, you know. I want to do it anyway, regardless of any kind of success or momentum. But I'm not desperate to go spend a bunch of money right now and upgrade my tech. Why? Because in part, that's getting in the way of what I can do right here and right now with what I've got. And I've found often that constraints can actually produce creativity. So when I was little, I used to like to draw. I still do too. Mitch Hedberg. But I used to almost exclusively use some kind of number 2 pencil. These days I like pens, but yeah, I used to draw almost exclusively with like any old pencil I could find. Eventually it became Dixon Ticonderoga number 2. Shout out, I am not paid by Dixon Ticonderoga, but I will receive any money that they want to send my way. But, you know, people knew that I liked to make art. I was always drawing and talking about the worlds that I was living in. And so for Christmas and birthdays, I would often receive really nice quality paper or pencil sets. You know, any artists that are familiar with the various grades of pencil darkness and such, they'll know what I'm talking about. But obviously there's value to that. Many people love to use that kind of thing. I never found myself personally drawn to it because for me, it got in the way of what I was using art for, which was essentially to exercise. And I mean that in the sense of like getting something out. I used it to exercise these worlds and creatures, fantasy lands and aliens. Anybody who knows me from my childhood would know that a lot of my free time, which was a lot of my time, was spent, I would say, nearly obsessing over these imaginary worlds that I had. And my mom used to say, write them down. And perhaps that could have been beneficial. Sometimes there's a part of me that wonders, what if I had started one of these long-running projects, earlier on? What if I had done a bigger world-building project and gotten started on that at an earlier phase? And there's time for that, of course. But again, for me, I had no concept or desire as a child to produce content in a way that was readily consumable by others, or that I could market, or that I could systematize. For me, the process was most enjoyable when I could share it directly with friends and like-minded creatives, and we could go and run around the woods and pretend we were aliens and carve sticks and superimpose those imaginary worlds onto this world. And that was the value that I got out of it. Sadly, at some point, many of my friends decided they no longer wanted to play imaginary games. And, that's a lot of part of growing up. A lot of people, when they get older, that impulse gets converted to more systematized, more formalized systems, such as Dungeons and Dragons, such as doing a more of a world-building project or writing books, things like that. For me, I let those muscles atrophy. So I started getting more, I think honestly the switch can be seen as a trade-off between things that I wanted to accomplish in the real world, real in air quotes, and things that really brought me joy from within. So as I finally found something that I wanted to study in higher education, it flipped to where I was not as interested, motivated, or perhaps it's even better to say I just spent all of that creative energy towards engaging with things, more in the academic sense or in the real world sense. And I have returned to art over time. It's never been I've never been without it. But I've returned to it over time because I've found that it's very healing. And I think if I had found more material success as a direct result of my academic ventures, it's possible I wouldn't be doing this right here and right now. So if you're enjoying this video, firstly, I'm honored. But secondly, it's a product of someone who has done a lot of searching in their young adult life to try and connect with that which I find meaningful. And the real amazing part is that it was always there all along. That might sound corny or cheesy, but I believe it. And if you feel a resonance with that, then hi, welcome. Glad you're here. What do I mean by it was all here all along? As a child, no one told me to find meaning in the world. I found it inherently meaningful because I wanted to learn and explore. And what got in the way of that was competing ideas of what is meaningful. So I'm sure everybody has different experiences with this, but especially when you're a child, you're far more vulnerable to influences and people who are going to superimpose their idea of what the right way of living is. And it's only natural. People do as well as they can. And that's that. But it took me a long time to reconnect with things that were meaningful to me and to find those the real source of my passion and love. And it always starts from within. I'm not saying I have everything figured out. Far be it. Far from it. But I'm a step closer than I was yesterday. And I feel that I'm heading in the right direction. I actually came up with this little phrase the other day. I liked that it rhymed. Just kind of came up spontaneously in my mind. It's not about perfection. It's about baby steps in the right direction. Do you know anybody who stresses over having all the right answers? And then when that's thrown into question, the response is fear, defensiveness, aggression. But the way that I see it, if you really know your truth, which is to say, if you really know what's true for you, and only you can decide that, only you can decide what is true for you. If you are accepting someone else's conception of truth, you're still accepting your own ability to trust yourself enough to surrender your trust to another. So, circling back, if you really know what's true, that confidence produces a peace that means that you don't need others to believe you. You don't need others to agree. By all means, take their opinions into account. Listen to people. Genuinely listen. Don't listen with an agenda. Don't be waiting to insert your opinion. Feel when the things they say produce reactivity within you. Feel that. Feel it in your body. Then listen to the words that start to float around your mind. But at the end of the day, trust yourself. That's what you've been doing this whole time anyway. So admit it. Now, as for what we've got going here so far, I like it. It's interesting. It's compelling. It's got a lot of very interesting visual motifs going on. Some very pleasant patterns to iterate and reproduce. But one thing that I like to do in my art is to find some kind of cohesion or find some way to just unite these shapes together. And as I said before, I really just go off of guidelines. And sorry for the shaky camera. I keep bumping it. But sometimes it's also fun to balance the goallessness with some real intentional planning. So I think what I'm going to do here is take some time to connect up some of these various areas and to give the illusion of continuity between them. And what that will do, if I pull it off, is it'll make your brain go, oh, that's an object, even though it's obviously something you've never seen before. Or I don't know, maybe you have, but I've never seen it before. If you have seen it before, tell me where. Very curious. If not, tell me what it looks like. Leave a comment. Tell me what you think this looks like. I like to pull lots of textures and apply them. But again, I don't really have much of a goal here, so I'm just going to keep connecting up these lines to create a sense of cohesion. You might like these little floating dots. Sometimes I would leave them, but I think what we're going for today is a united shape. So we're just going to see what happens here. Kind of like what's going on here. You may also notice I don't really like to leave a lot of what I call open lines. Not sure if there's a more technical art term that somebody could use. This section here in particular, this section here would have what I would call maybe some open lines, but I have connected them so they don't just float lacking context. Here's a little floating object. I probably won't connect that one. So one other thing that I sometimes imagine in these pieces is that they're like MRI scans of hyperdimensional objects. So like, you know how when you watch a GIF or a video of an MRI scan, it's all cross sections of the body, right? And you can recognize parts of it like the brain and whatnot, but as you pass through the body, the shapes will morph and change. And all these 2D cross sections really don't tell the full story. They really don't. But they do give impressions, and they can be very useful tools for doctors to identify. Sorry for the focus there. Just gonna have to put up with it. Running up against the limits of our simple technological setup here. My lovely wife has just tuned in, and she says that she thinks it looks like a computer's brain mapped out, which is really cool. Thanks for the input. I'm not sure if I'll always be able to comment on everything, but I do encourage people to comment, communicate, always. Okay, so let's look what we got here. Kind of looking around the boundaries of this object. If I was trying to get in, like a maze, there's no entrance. So right then and there, I basically just accomplished what I set out to do, simply speaking. So now we have the makings of some kind of cohesive object. And from here, it's basically just about filling in details. So I think I'm going to spend some time, do a little simple hatching, and the nice thing about this part is it doesn't take much thinking at all. Not much decision making. It's just about kind of repeating motifs and patterns, and that can be very relaxing. And again, there's no real place or requirements for where I need to place these things. It's just wherever my little heart desires. And it's really just to make things pop out and give them a sense of, identity, maybe. Perhaps I'd like to fill in some shapes too. I like to be kind of sparing with filling in the negative space, but it can also be very fun. So let's do that now. Let's do some alternating patterns. Why not? Let's do some more over here. I've already got this pattern started. This part might be a little quiet. This is where a time-lapse video would be really cool, I think, just to kind of see the product on a faster time scale. So, like I said, if you're interested in that, stay tuned, because I will probably be putting together some time-lapse videos as well. You may also see if the camera quality is good enough. I've got some smudges. Not ideal, because I tend to like to do precise line work, and so it's very difficult to cover over smudges like that. But you know what? I don't really care. I don't think it takes away from the art enough to matter. Especially because, as I said, bumping the camera again. As I said, the real exercise here is not the product, the end product of the art. It's just showing up, hence the name. And that's going to be an encouragement to me, because it's going to make things a little bit easier for me to just do it. And I hope it is going to be an encouragement to others as well, because I understand the struggle. Yeah, I like this nice little checker alternating pattern, so I think I'm going to start including that elsewhere here. We're going to have to lay the groundwork to get that started. I just like the effect that it produces. Nice contrast against all the solid white enclosed spaces. And I think it also helps your eyes pick out the individual shapes. And again, there's no real shapes here. There's nothing here that I'm going, oh, this is a this, or this is, that's a that. But your brain is a pattern recognition device. So I like playing with that aspect of it and kind of riding the edge, riding the line between what your brain considers noise and chaos and what your brain considers interesting and visually stimulating. I'm not going to lie, though. Sometimes this part that I'm working on right now, just filling in the details, sometimes it can be boring. Sometimes it can be a slog. Sometimes it can be like grinding. But I can't think of much in life that's worth doing that it doesn't involve some kind of grind here and there. So I think it's worth putting up with for the effect that it produces. That's cool. I think that brings a little bit of balance. So I think I'm going to keep adding stuff up here. So, at least currently in my Instagram bio, you'll see some phrases. One of those is illusory continuity. And the meaning behind that is that I like to use these lines to create the illusion that there's some kind of continuous object here. But it's all arbitrary, right? That's where the next line comes, arbitrary significance. Because actually, these aren't anything. It's clearly something, and yet, paradoxically, it's nothing. And I like that. That's where my username comes from. Paradoxicalocus. If anybody's wondering how to pronounce that. I just mashed two words together. Paradoxical and locus. The paradox part, I just explained, comes from the sort of paradox of, the fact that this looks like something and yet it's nothing. It's part of the name. Locus refers to a central point of focus, and that's what we are. Or just speaking about myself, to keep things simple, we are, or I will say I am, a locus of perception. Sometimes I think it's really amazing that our eyes have these black holes in them, pupils. And it's like a camera lens or aperture, I don't know. My lovely wife, who is currently on the stream, would probably know the correct term for it. But these pupils, they're holes in our eyes, and they're dark, they're black because they take in light. They don't produce light. And yet, it's their emptiness that allows them to channel light. Have you ever heard of the idea that, it's the emptiness of the pot or the pitcher that allows it to contain water? And it's the emptiness of the window that allows it to let in light into the dark room of the house. The house would be nothing without the empty spaces in between. Okay, I'm going to do something here. Ready? I'm going to flip it around. See how we like that. Hopefully that'll minimize some of the smudging. So the video may end unexpectedly. And I think for today, whatever the end product is, I'll post it as is, as a product of today's session. I really need to stop bumping this camera. And then I might work on it independently. But, you You can't have wine without fermentation. Likewise, some art needs to sit. And some people are really all about that grind. They're really all about making it work in a single session. I might let this one sit. Because I've actually found on multiple occasions that I don't like something that I've made, and then after letting it sit for a few days, it's kind of like when you say a word again and again and it loses its meaning. So likewise, you get very tired. Your brain, as a pattern recognition machine, will, because it's lazy, or rather it wants to save energy, it will start to tune things out. So that's why you can look at a light or a pattern, and then you can look quickly to a blank wall and see it projected in negative. That's because your brain is tuning it out. So anything that is too constant is just not stimulating enough for us. And so going back to the idea of just letting this art sit a little bit and ferment, yeah, I think it's a legitimate process for creation. Trust me, I am quite impatient, and I will cut corners to make things happen faster. Because I really don't like waiting sometimes. But that doesn't mean it's also not a good thing to practice. All things in moderation, as they say. In the future, I'll try and keep a clock by me because I really want to try and limit these to half-hour sessions. Because I think the most important principle behind this series, or this project, whatever it is the showing up. And so, again, I'm not trying to produce something here that I go, oh yeah, this is definitely finished, and I have any pressure. I don't want to put that pressure on myself to produce a finished product each session. So it's about the process. So yeah, I definitely need to keep an eye on the time in the future, but not too closely, because looking at the time all the time can also have a negative effect. Anybody who remembers in school looking at the clock, did it ever make the class go faster? In fact, it probably made things go slower. I find the less time I think about time, the faster it passes. But you know what? To my surprise and delight, I am seeing something coming together here. What do you think? All right. Well, I might just end things here for today. But I'm excited. I think it's a good start. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this project progresses over time. So, as I said, in the future, I might not be able to keep track of everybody that pops into the chat. But if you're still here, WavS2021, thank you for showing up. And Jordan Winter Studios, thank you for showing up. All right. Till next time.